This episode, we're talking about propane. Yeah! Uh-oh. This is smoking up really bad. I thought this would burn quicker. Okay, shit! We're talking about propane. You need propane to heat the van and to cook and do all sorts of things. Rock. Get down, rock. My dad helped me with a lot of it, and so again, we're here talking together about what it was like. This one jumps around quite a bit, just like the plumbing did. I guess you want to imagine that you get to tackle one thing at a time. Oh, I'm gonna knock out all the electrical. I'm gonna knock out all this, and then I'm gonna knock out all the propane. You know, it doesn't work that way. But yeah, it's one of those things where, you know, you have to figure out how much you're gonna need and where you're gonna wanna mount it and how you're gonna distribute it and what is gonna run off of it. After I figured out what I wanted in the van, which was an oven stove combo, which needed propane, I wanted a furnace. And because I have a gas van, not a diesel van, I couldn't get one of those diesel heaters that run off the van. And an electrical heater, they're just not efficient. And then
also your hot water heater.
The hot water heater, because I had a shower, I needed hot water, and that requires propane to heat the water up. And so there was those three main things that needed gas. These Class Bs or Class As, these large RVs, they have mounted tanks. They're a little smaller. They'll do like a 6-gallon or an 8-gallon, but they're mounted underneath. And I think a big thing that everyone's always like, oh, you're gonna blow up. Fire. No.
Rock's gonna kick up and poke a hole in it
Yeah.
or something like that.
I mean, that does, it can happen. I'm not saying that it won't happen, but I probably won't blow up.
No.
That's not how that works.
No.
They're built to take a beating. They're built to be mounted externally. And so I had seen other people with different tanks, and then I saw there was this 12.2 gallon tank, which was a decent size. It's a Flame King horizontal RV propane tank, and it's 12.2 gallons. And the dimensions are 12 by 28 inches. Then the height, it has a 4-inch collar, which gave it like 15. That tank was then 15 inches, which gave very low clearance on the bottom. Early on, when we first started converting the van, we were like, okay, let's get this thing mounted up. And so we pulled the spare tire.
God. I left that bolt in there. I left it in there. I was like, oh, that way it won't fall and hit me in the face. Awesome.
We jacked it up. We got a little jack and put it up into place, and we immediately saw it was like 8 inches from the ground. Maybe not even, but it was really like flush with the axle. And so if I were to hit a bump, that would be probably the first thing that, you know, a rock or a boulder would come in contact with, which isn't good. I ended up coming back to my dad's. And we took those collars, those mounting brackets, and shortened them way down so where they were almost flush with the tank.
3 underneath. Dumb as shit. Marker.
So we've reached a point where it's time to mount the propane tank, and what we've done is we've backed the van up to the barn, and we've taken a car jack and some other little floor jacks and put them up, raised it a bit. We're gonna take this car jack, put the tank on it, put it into place. I'm gonna send some well, first I'm gonna mark the holes. Boom, 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 boom. Send some pilot holes through, and because it's kind of offset because of the exhaust, it puts us at this weird position where it's gonna probably cut into this battery bank. I might have to pull both batteries out because I don't want to puncture one of these batteries while I'm sending a pilot hole up through.
Am I stuck on the guard? Oh, I see where we're at. Oh, we're on it. Fuck! You just jammed it into my elbow. Fuck! Oh. Okay, I'm tight.
Yeah, you're up tight.
Oh. Woo! What?
Hot metal falling on my face.
And so we just used some big carriage bolts.
Yep.
And I remember Nick and Matt were there. My buddy Matt, he was like my childhood friend. He lived in Chicago and only would come out on the weekends, but he had different experiences than I did. And he ended up meeting a woman who was a sex trafficker slash money launderer for the cartel, and he ended up in jail for a while with some felonies. And that summer was his first summer back. And he was
So he
kind
decided he's gonna come over and give a hand.
Are you in?
I'm in, Bubba.
Plus, you're not in jail either, too.
Yeah. I didn't have a last summer I didn't have summer.
Yeah, no shit.
But
Great help.
he did help, which was nice. And my cousin Nick came over and helped.
Yeah.
I hope I'm not going to even see the DUI. She's like, well, oh, Nick won't be happy about that.
Good audio.
Alright, so it's all mounted. It's only got what? I only have like a ½ inch of clearance now, which is way better than it was. And then as you can see, it's above the axle. So when it goes to bottom out, hopefully I don't have to puncture this thing. So we got that mounted, and then it was a long break before we touched it again. You know, that was just put there in place because it took up a lot of room and I was moving a lot of stuff around at the time. So once the tank was up there, Kyle and I, before I moved out of my place, put in the furnace and the hot water heater. So the issue we're having is we need to find out exactly where we're going to mount it because we got this plastic here that we're most likely going to have to cut into, but then there's also this divot, this rib, which we won't be able to mount the gate to because it's not a flat surface, and then we'll have holes. We'll have gaps that lead into this surface. The water heater, we wanted to keep it in a place that would be like concealed, and I knew I was gonna put the couch where it was, like put the couch over it, and it had to be a couple inches off the ground because it gets hot and you don't want it sitting on a wood surface or whatever. And so we put it on, well, we ended up putting it on wood spacers. Cool. We got our insulation cut out for this bad boy. We're gonna go ahead and just drill the 4 corners. Boom. There's that little black mark there. Black mark there. Black mark there. With the top of that. Oh, it's into the plastic.
I figured it would be. I should have made it go around there.
We're using an angle grinder to cut the sides of the van for the hot water heater because Kyle's convinced that it's going to be a lot easier and smoother. We'll see if that's the case. Still too short. I think I'm gonna have to cut a lot more of the plastic out. I think we're closer. Alright, so it's still not quite sitting in yet. It's still not quite setting in. So we are going to now use what? I've got a buffing pad on here. I'm gonna try to just see if we can. clean up these edges, try to get rid of some of these sharper edges too.
And then hopefully it's so close to fitting in just by taking away a fraction of an inch, we'll be able to slide it in. Yo! Yo!
That's gonna be hot.
Got our wet edges. Opening the door helps too. I'm a furnace. Instant hot water, here we come.
In the van, the actual interior of the van, there's this like angled, the body, remember, because we had to cut that,
Yeah,
there's a
that's right.
support in there.
These guys are too high to get the actual hot water heater in to then screw into these mounting spots. So that we've got to grind these, at least like score them, and then pound them down. Because if we went any higher here, we'd be on this divot. All right, nice and ugly. You're almost there.
And so there's a bunch of stuff you've got to avoid. It wasn't easy. Like it took a lot of like trimming and cutting and trimming again, and then even cutting off corners of the heater itself. I eventually came back to my dad's and we had to like trim it even more and trim off the corners of the furnace itself to get it mounted.
The metal, the frame is butting into here, so we're gonna have to cut down, grind off a corner.
You can get the gate on, which is again butyl self-tapping screws, and then the water heater mounts to that through 4 screws, and that's what keeps it to the wall. But we got that in, and once we knew where that was sitting, we knew what space we had for the furnace.
What we have to cut for the furnace is two holes, intake and exhaust. And so we were gonna do these circular hole saws, which I only have like certain sizes. And then I remembered I had this thing, which is an adjustable hole saw or something around the lines of it.
Try it.
We're gonna go for it.
I want to play a game.
This didn't work, so we ran to Lowe's. Got a 2 1/4 inch, but now we can't get the mounting piece off. Come on, marker. It's better than a marker. Do not block. Oh, I'm doing a bang up butyl job. I think we're sponsored by Butyl. Demonetized. Butyl-Borgs.
Now that looking back at it, I wish we would have put it a little higher because we ended up having to cut it into the plastic a little bit, and we had a little space to raise it up. But again, you have to keep it off the ground. You have to have a decent amount of space between everything, and we needed the room to build the couch around it. So we got those 2 things in. Kyle and I got them roughly placed. We didn't mount anything down. We just put the holes in the walls, so we knew where they were going to live. And then when we came back later on, we started to mount things down, but we'll come back to that because it wasn't until later that we actually strapped everything down. We had our propane tank mounted, we had our furnace where it needed to go, and we had our hot water heater where it needed to go. And then during that time, we had put together a rough kitchenette and we put my Dometic oven, whatever, 3-burner stove, in place. And so we knew where that was gonna live. And so we were ready to start running our gas lines. We went back to Greg's, and it was time to hook everything up. So we put it back on his lift so we can get underneath. In order to get the propane tank ready, you need to get a propane regulator. This doesn't come stock with the tank. You have to get it. It's a 2-stage propane regulator, which then regulates the pressure of gas coming from the tank, running to the lines. You then span off of that.
It's too high a pressure to come right off of the tank, so you have to have a regulator to bring it down, step it down to the proper pressure, which is only about 5 pounds, 4 pounds, 3 pounds, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Then we got the remote fill.
That was it.
The Nash Fuel remote
We
fill,
also attached to the bumper.
which is something you need to do if your tank is far enough away that people can't really get to it. Looking at the tank itself, you got your pressure gauge, which is self-explanatory. You have your fill, which is labeled that way. That's your bleeder. So what this is a propane remote fill, so you don't have to climb up under here when you go into a fill station and then have, you know, whoever's doing it slide under your vehicle to see the bleeder and the fill. So what it does is it takes these lines,
Rubber hose that extends the bolt bleeder up to this, as well as the fill.
right here,
And then the other
fill,
these
bleeder.
are, you thread this part onto the hose, and this threads in and forces the hose into the ribs,
And
and
it goes just like that on there.
put one end on, and then you figure out the length that you're gonna need to make the shortest
Run.
run. Cut it off and do the same thing on the other end.
And when you do buy these remote fills, you have a thinner tube, which is like what?
1/4 inch and 3/8 looks like.
So they are different sizes, and so are these fittings. There wasn't instructions that
no
came with it, and we
your
couldn't
normal
see any, find
That's
anything.
not something I
online.
deal with every day anyway.
Right. So we figured that out, and it comes with a mounting bracket, but again, we just took that and mounted it straight to that hitch that I had purchased and mounted onto the van. And so again, we put it to the rear, and eventually I put a swing arm on there with a tire, and it's kind of a pain to fill up having it on the rear. I think going back, I might put it on the side, because when you pull up to these fill stations, it's usually short lines. And so
Yeah,
I've
I
had to
think
do a
about
lot of things where I'll have to reverse up to it or pull over a median and do all this crazy stuff, and they look at me like, what is this? But hey,
Live and learn.
Right. That's the way we did it. I would say put it on the side of all your other stuff. So like,
Yeah.
try to keep your emptying, like your gray water emptying on the side, that you put your freshwater fill and your shore power line and your propane fill. Try to keep it all on one side, because that way, you know, in like the gas tank, wherever you fill the gas tank up, put it on that side. You know, that way you remember, I'm gonna pull up on this side, and this is where I'm gonna do everything. We got that ran. It was pretty simple to get that going, and while that was going, I had to figure out a way to fish a copper line, because we ended up going with copper. And I believe they were 3/8 copper, 3/8 lines.
All 3/8 copper. It contour according to what you to get it to where it's protected. And it's also very forgiving. Copper is one of those.
It's easy to cut, when you need to cut it to size.
You could almost flatten it out, and you're still gonna get gas through it.
And so we used copper lines, and I think we bought about 50 feet, maybe 40 feet,
Yeah,
like
maybe.
2 packs of the 20 feet
Yeah.
lines. So basically, we had to figure out how to get gas to the furnace, the hot water heater, and the oven. Now the oven's on the right side of the van, the furnace and the hot water heater on the left side. So we figured out that we could run one line straight down in the back behind everything, like the fridge and everything,
Yeah.
down into right next to the AC unit, out and run back toward the propane tank. And then we figured we could do one line in between the furnace and the hot water heater that comes down, fishes around, and then those two lines meet with a T. And I do want to say, when we put the gas lines in there, those copper lines, we put a sealant in there so that when you're driving, you don't kink your lines, you don't break into them, and then end up with a gas leak because you went over some rough terrain. So since you're on camera, explain what that fitting is you're putting on.
Compression fitting can be used on most anything. Water lines, grease, air. It takes this, when you crush, it's called a crush nut, crush ferrule.
Why do you put it on and then take it off?
Because you set your ferrule by running it up tight. Once the ferrule's set, then I can back it off and tighten up on the next one. This is why you pretty the pipe up the best you can to get it straight.
It was hard to bend. And then a single line goes back to the regulator, which then goes into the propane tank.
So that's tight. Everything feels good there. This is the line that feeds stove, the hot water heater, and furnace. Comes through the preset regulator that brings it down to a workable pressure. And this is just about buttoned up. I just gotta tighten up the nut and ferrule on this one.
This is the hot water heater and stove gas line coming out. Run back to this T, which then runs to the tank, which I'll show in a second. And then this is the oven gas line, and it wraps around to here. And then those run out to here, this remote fill.
So the line that ran from the oven was real straightforward.
Yeah, it's a cheapo. I see the blade flexing.
Now the line that ran between the furnace and the hot water heater was a lot harder. The reason why it was a lot harder was because of the amount of space we had to work with.
So currently,
Oh god, it's gonna be a real pain in the ass.
my dad is trying to attach a T from that gas line I ran underneath to run to the hot water heater in the furnace. But it's so tight under there, it's difficult to get leverage to tighten it down.
Because you really got to crank them down
Yeah, you can.
to crush those
Yes, you
fittings.
do.
The furnace is easy. We just ran underneath it to then go straight into the side
Yeah,
of it,
right.
and it was just, it mounted right in. And we used the, Teflon. I remember we used that tape.
Some
on
Teflon. NPT pipe thread, you have to use a Teflon or a Teflon sealant, you know.
Yeah, what is MPT FIP tip flip dip?
It's national. Here I am, machinist, and I
Yeah.
can't tell you exactly what the national pipe tap. And that's a beveled or a tapered thread that locks as
Lay
it
down.
gets tighter as they go together. The male is tapered one way, and the female receiving end is tapered the other way. So as it gets tighter, it seals itself.
Okay.
But to help that, you put Teflon on there, and it take you in even farther to give you that extra, less resistance. So it'll tighten up tighter that way and give you a better seal.
I remember when we first did it, we got the furnace lined up fine, but then getting that hot water heater, it had a special twist on. And when we did
that
it,
was a JIC fitting, which is a straight thread with a flange on it. So when it tightens up, the flange on the pipe actually comes up against the bevel on that JIC, and that's what makes your seal.
so we ran into a couple issues with that.
Don't ask me what JIC stands for, because I do not know.
We didn't have that hooked up, and so Kyle and I took a stab at it, and we ended up buying this like universal dummy rigger mount.
All right, so we're back from Lowe's with all of our goodies. We ended up buying this Dummy Man's universal gas installation kit.
Does it say Dummy Man?
And as you can tell, when you have a dog who likes to be in the way and small compartments to get to hook up connections, you start to run out of room. So this is the last piece of the gas line. This is our feed. This is the dumb man's. It's the universal gas installation kit. Gas for dummies. So that black hose is 1/2 inch, and what we've been running is 3/8, right? Yeah. And so we needed to go from a 3/8 T, right there where you can see those copper lines are running, up to 1/2 inch, then 1/2 inch back to 3/8 to get into the hot water heater itself. But now it's connected. Right? Yep.
And so Kyle and I had the gas lines ran, and so then it was time for me to go fill the tank up. I'm on my way to U-Haul to fill up the propane tanks, because today Kyle and I are gonna test to see if we have any gas leaks, and if I don't, I'm gonna have heat, hot water, and an oven. And I just want to tell you guys right now that they say they fill propane, but it seems that nobody that works there knows how to do that. And I have found that to be the case when going to like gas stations that say they fill up propane. All U-Hauls, almost all U-Hauls, they're just like, we don't know what we're doing. I've had terrible luck with that. But eventually they had somebody there who had filled up a tank and felt comfortable enough to do it. And you're only supposed to fill up about 80% of the tank. And so the 12.2, I'll put like 9 to 10. So we filled it up, and then it was time to check for leaks.
What we're gonna do to check for leaks is take soap.
Give a cup.
Soap or well water. So the idea is to take that soapy water, wipe it on all the fitting areas, and find out if there's a leak, a gas leak. And if there is, it'll bubble up. Bubbles. Right there.
Where?
On my side.
I just need to tighten it.
Which is the connector. We are into the interior connections, soaping them up, checking, and we got one leak there.
Where?
At the back end of that.
Here?
The one you did yesterday. Connecting to the TC.
Oh, fuck. Man, that was the one I was worried about too.
Or was it? It's on the back end there.
Oh, this one's leaking too down here.
Yep. So we got 2 leaks here. This is the last connection we're gonna check. We're gonna see if we got any nice leaks coming out of this one. We're in the clear for the oven. So final leak has been sealed, that one down there. So we're gonna test out the stove to see if we've got some gas running and we don't explode.
Before you get gas or anything running in your vehicle, make sure you put a propane detector in there. Propane is a heavy gas, so it sinks, it sits. And that means you need to hook your propane detector low. So make sure you put one in there, get it hooked up to your electrical. That's another DC powered item. And make sure it's working properly so that you don't get gassed out.
Alright, so we're now at the stage of hooking the thermostat up to see if the furnace is going to work. Basically, you need 2 wires to run to the thermostat to open a valve to release the gas into the furnace, correct?
Yeah, well, think of this as your on-off switch, and it turns everything on.
So, right now, there is power that is ran to this furnace. Now the 2 blue lines are what I connected to these red lines here because I don't have color-coded wiring and I don't want to spend any more money on it. But those are supposed to run into this little power block or whatever it is, connector block, and W is for heat relay, while the C is for power. Okay, and so with those 2 connected, we can pop the interface on there and hopefully be able to kick this thing on.
Told you. Okay, heat on. It's 57 in here right now. I want to see if it'll heat this place up to 60 and then turn off.
As you can see, that light is on in there, which means you can feel the heat blowing out right now. Rocky's really digging it. He's just relaxing in the heat. So it says it's 64 in here now. It's still running. And so what Joe's cousin said is, there it goes. That the blower will run a little longer after the flame kits out so it can cool down the fans or cool down the coils. Something like that, so you don't burn down. But yeah, it heated it up. It took what, 3 minutes, 4 minutes? And now it's 65 in here. Guys, I have hot water. Nice hot water. I'm gonna take a shower.
We had gas, no more leaks, and we went on our Tetons trip. Now at the very end of our Tetons trip, because we camped on BLM land, we were hitting a bunch of bumps and things like that, and we ended up getting ourselves a gas leak. It turns out that that fitting that we did with the line, that weird universal kit we bought, was not a proper fitting. It worked, but it wasn't working. We had too many adapters, things were leaking, things were getting loose.
Had to clean that up.
Yeah, so we ended up pulling that out, and then we did a whole crazy adapter. It was like 4 adapter pieces that came off that.
But it worked. Hooked up the gas. This is what they call a sniffer. So that we know that we've got nice tight fittings, tight joints on everything, and no leakage. We run this thing around, and it's got an alarm. It picks up any gas, which if you watch, I take my lighter. I don't light it. I just... I gotta let it clear up.
Rocky doesn't like it. So my dad put together this little fitting because we had a leak here, and we have another leak in this area. I can't hold both, so right here we have a leak. Killed the gas so you can't see it bubbling up. Every other connection seems solid. There's no gas bubbles there, but there it was bubbling quite a bit.
But then we ended up switching it again.
Yeah, that's right.
And eventually we ended up just bending copper line into like a corkscrew, and then got it to fit. The reason we wanted to save as much space as we could underneath the couch area by the furnace and the hot water heater was because I wanted to utilize that space for a food tray for the dog and a little slide out drawer that I put my trash in and my laundry things. So
once again, every little spot,
right,
nook or cranny, you could put something in to utilize it.
Right.
We did.
And again, too, it's good to have those spaces in a way that you can still access them. So I can still get my hands in there underneath the couch or pull the drawer out. So if there is a leak, I can adjust it or fix it or tighten it or replace a piece, because you need to know that you have access to those points. So once we had everything set for the furnace and the hot water heater, we had to mount them down. And originally we just kind of had them placed. The hot water heater was pretty solid because it mounts into the side of the van. But the furnace, it just slides into those exhaust tubes, and then it's kind of just sits loosely there. And it has these 4 holes in it on the bottom, so you could drill it down to wherever you're putting it, but we needed to have a gap between the ground and everywhere. And so we ended up using, what were the rubber bottom to a chair, or
no, those are insulators. Those are non-conductive because these 2 pieces are separate. That stud is separate from this stud, and so they're usually used for electrical things,
Okay.
But we used them for spacers, keep it up off the floor, and
Yeah.
also mount
Washers.
to those, right?
So the furnace itself is attached to the sidewall of the van, but right here it's got these little rubber legs that have bolts running through them from top down, and then they just sit into holes that are balanced by washers underneath. So it's not really locked down. What we're gonna do to lock it down is use this
Plumber strapping.
and then screw that down to the subfloor, and it'll hopefully keep everything where it needs to be.
Once everything was mounted down, and we built the couch around it and had the face to it, we had to figure out, we had to make an extension to the furnace so that it would exhaust on the end of the couch, because it was too far
further back than the face of the couch, so we made an extension.
So this is the transition piece or ductwork extension, whatever you want to call it, that my dad whipped together for the furnace so that it can get flush with the legs. So we just attached it to the lip.
Once that was there, we were able to build kind of the face of the couch to it, and then we put a grate that Greg had. So I want to talk really quick about having propane and what it's like during the summer and during the winter. During the summer, it's real easy. For the 12.2 gallon tank, I used maybe a quarter of the tank over the course of 4 months, because I'm not running the furnace. All I'm doing is cooking and taking quick showers. But during the winter, you kind of go through it fairly quickly. I don't know. Running the furnace is a little bit of a battle. You can't keep it at like what your house is at, because you're gonna burn through your gas really quick. You know, in a typical home, you'll probably keep it at like between 69 and 72 degrees. That's probably what most people do, unless you're older and you're a crazy old person who keeps it at like 85. But
I'm not quite there, but mine's more like 75 right now.
That will burn through your gas really quickly. You kind of have to be able to bundle up and deal with what you've got. When I'm not in the van, I keep it at 50 degrees, and then when I'm in the van, I'll put it to like 60, and then when I'm sleeping, it goes back to 50. And when I keep it at that, I can have the gas last about 3 to 4 weeks, and so I'll fill up about once a month. And that's with cooking and showering and running the heat. Now, filling up the gas is a bit of a pain. Like I said, the people at U-Haul are not people you want to rely on to fill your gas. Gas filling isn't their main job. And so, you know, maybe one old dude there will know how to do it and have the confidence to do it, but then a lot of the younger people there who are hired on are just like, I don't want to touch it, I don't want to blow up. Which honestly, gas is probably safer than gasoline. I have better luck going to a pilot. You know, more RVs go to pilots because they're out on the roads driving, and those places have their fill stations, and they fill those up. And semi-truck guys, they have to have.
I'm sure they've got their propane heat.
You'll have more people there who know what they're doing and willing to do it for you. And then finally, the best experience you'll get and the best price you'll get is going to a local gas dealership. That's what they do. The price is almost like 50 to $1 cheaper, 50 cents to $1 cheaper there.
Like AmeriGas or something like that?
And they know exactly what they're doing when they fill up, and it's like in and out. And so you get a better price there. And as far as gas prices go, I usually get about 10 gallons. It's usually about $3 to $3.15 a gallon. So I spend anywhere between $30 to $40 a month on gas in the winter. And like I said, during the summer months, 4 to 5 months, I just went off of a quarter of a tank. When it's super cold out, I would say plug into shore power and use a small space heater, or get a little heater buddy. You could put it in your bedroom or any little space and it'll keep your area warm. But a lot of times it's just bundling up. Just wear layers and stay higher up. The heat goes up, it rises. Don't be on the ground. Your feet will get cold. And that's propane. Those are my thoughts. I would say again, in an ideal world, all of your gas is on the same side as all of your water. It's all on one side, so you don't have to trek around in different locations.
No blueprint to go by.
I got a lot of stuff crammed into a little spot.
Yep.
So if you want to utilize your space,
into a 5-pound bag.
You've got to be creative, and that might not be always the most efficient thing, but it's what we did, and this is how we did it. This might not be the proper way to do everything, but it's the way we did it. And so you can hopefully learn what we did.
Everything was done.
We weren't just going willy-nilly.
Right.
I do feel like a lot of people are seeing my videos, and because I keep them humorous, they're like, oh, a moron made a van. That's not the case at all.
No, it was all crap.
Whatever I couldn't do myself, I had people who knew what they were doing to help me out. There was a lot of talented people who worked on this van with me, and I don't want to convey that it's this thing that anybody can jump on and do themselves, especially in the time frame we had. I'm sure you can get on and learn through trial and error, but I just feel a lot of these people out there who are doing these YouTube channels don't show the errors in their things that they're doing. They make it seem like it's that, and it's just not.
Don't be afraid to challenge yourself. That's
That's the biggest takeaway. Is like something like this can be a big undertaking, and I will say that I bit off more than I can chew, which is something I do with everything.
Yeah.
But it is a learning experience, and I think that it's one of those things that a lot of us have lost. Especially my generation, you know, we're all told to go to college to get a great job, and a lot of the trades works or the trades people are suffering in the sense that not a ton of people are going to trade school and learning
young
these
guys
things.
that are going to take over
What this guy's doing.
Yeah.
And we need that. And it's not a terrible life. You make good money doing that. Maybe the hours suck, and maybe the work is hard. But I'll tell you now, I'm in debt from school, and I'm struggling with the work that I'm doing, and it is a creative outlet. But at the same time, look at what I'm doing now. I'm going and learning these trades and creating something that I didn't go to school for. And I'm going to people who didn't go to school to help me out do these things.
Yeah. Okay. Well, very good.
Okay. Well,
I'm freezing.
yeah, that's it.
I'm going to go live in my house.
Yeah. Thanks for watching. Again, click like, subscribe, tell your friends about this. I hope this video helped you guys out. You learned from the mistakes we made. You learned from the successes that we had. Emulate the things that we did right and wrong. I don't care. Hit the bell and stay tuned for more videos in the future. And that's it. Again, going back in to warm up because I'm literally shaking and shivering. He's already taken off. Oi.